This is the Michael Brian Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. And I am joined with Patrick Gaudet, who is the CEO of Clicot watches and also the Time Fixes Everything movement. So we're discussing personal development, brand building, and everything in between. So Patrick, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So as a starting point, I wonder where the passion for watches came from and why you decided to start Clicot.
Very, very simple. So basically, the passion for watches has been there all along. What happened really is a few years ago, I was working in the automobile industry as a financial director. I don't know if you know what that is.
Financial director, I'm guessing is like a CFO type of thing.
Well, it was kind of actually we're the ones that, we're taking care of customers' insurance, warranties, things like that when you purchase a car. So, I mean, it's a good position to have, made, a quite, a pretty good salary. And so when COVID happened, we couldn't meet any customers because obviously the dealerships were closed down. And so I took all the money that I had saved up and I took the time that we were off to decide that I didn't want to go back to work anymore, that I wanted to start my own company. And I didn't want to do something that everybody does, or either real estate agent or things like that. So I said, you know what? I'm going to start my own watch brand. And that's where everything started. So it started during COVID in 2021.
I also know that a lot of the things that you used to do was involved around relationships. Is that right? Have you got any tips for relationships? It seems like something that you'd be quite good at.
Yeah, actually, it's been 2 years that I've been very involved in giving advice on relationships. I am a disclaimer, by the way, I am no psychologist. I'm no doctor. I'm just a regular human being that has done a lot of work on himself. That's how I would put it. So basically, after I launched the company, I unfortunately had a separation, a relationship of 7 years that came to an end. And from that point on, I decided to work on myself. And basically, I became a self-taught, I guess, relationship connoisseur. I guess we could put it that way. And I took it to TikTok. And then taking that to TikTok, everything just blew up. And we're at 331,000 followers right now who follow me for relationship advice. So it took a big turn there.
Oh, I can imagine. It must be strange at first anyway, when you first started, because you maybe were not really that sure about how it would go. What was it like to start creating the content and then after it blew up, what was it like then?
Well, so what happened is basically I shared my story, and what I realized is that a lot of people could relate to it. What I've noticed in the past year and a half is that a lot of my content is, I would say, relatable. And so it's different than my content from my content that is to psychologists, let's say, is usually when you go see a therapist or a specialist, they will listen to you and they will challenge you, but they never really talk about their own experiences, right? And so I took it to TikTok and I started doing that. I started talking about my experiences and how I felt and started showing myself, as a man, which is very different, a man showing himself vulnerable, caught everyone's attention. I got to say, a lot of women follow me. Most of my followers are women. That would be 70% actually are women. So I think that's what women enjoy is the fact that they can see a man that's, emotionally mature and available and able to talk about it. And that's why it took off so hard.
I can imagine that being an interesting thing for you when you realize that it's going well. Like the amount of times that I imagine men would be vulnerable or emotional for it to be, I guess, taken in a negative way or have some negative consequences, for want of a better expression. And then when you start doing it and sharing it online and it seems to go well, that must have been a bit surreal for you.
It was surreal, yes, because we hear it a lot, right? That women would love a man that can express himself, that can talk about his feelings. But then again, men are raised and taught not to talk about their emotions and feelings. We have to man up, we have to roll up the sleeves, and we have to do all that stuff. And so we kind of taught differently when we're young. And so to do this at 36 years old and to start opening up after so much time, I think that's what people enjoy. And I think a lot of men, unfortunately, they're scared to do it because they're scared to be judged. And obviously, I knew that from the get-go. I knew that if I did this on TikTok, obviously I was going to get judged. And that's been the case. I've been called a simp. I've been called gay. I've been called too in touch with my feminine side. I've had a lot of negative comments about that from men. But, the reality is there's a lot of men that would love to be able to express themselves that way.
I suppose that's like a taste of what most men, or at least some men, would experience on a day-to-day basis when they were trying to, I guess, just explain themselves or talk things out or just express who they are, essentially. How do you encourage men to do what you have done in a way? Because you're essentially expressing yourself to over 300,000 people, roughly. How would you encourage men to be strong enough or in some ways vulnerable enough to be able to do this? Because it seems like if you could do it to that many people, most men should be able to do it to one or two or possibly even five.
Absolutely. And I think the question really is, do I encourage men to do it? I would say no. I show them. I kind of lead by example. Sometimes people say, do what I do, not say what I say, or do what I say, that is. You've probably heard that expression before. So I'm basically out there showing them how to do it, talking about situations where this kind of stuff can happen. And I think leading by example is the best way to do it because there's no way really to talk and sit down with a man and tell him to express his feelings. You have to show it. And I've realized in the past, since I started doing this on TikTok, I've went on I have a boat and sometimes I take some friends on the boat. And you're in the middle of the lake and you're just the two of you and you start talking about things. And then the moment you show yourself vulnerable in front of your friend, that kind of opens it up. It opens up the situation, and then whoops, all of a sudden they start opening up too, and you're able to discover and find out things that you never knew about them because the contents wasn't right. So I think it's not really telling them how to do it; it's really just showing them how to do it.
That makes perfect sense, actually. I wonder, did the relationship with your friends change when you started doing that? Because I'm picturing it being like a one-way street initially when you share something or you express yourself, and then all of a sudden the gates open because then they feel like they can express themselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question too. So it kind of took a turn that I didn't expect. So obviously in the early stages, a lot of my entourage, friends and family, like were like, what the hell is this guy doing? He's not a relationship expert. Who does he think he is going on TikTok and giving advice like that? That was the first initial reaction. But a year later, what's happened is actually a drastic change. Now I have friends and family contacting me to get advice in their relationships, which is pretty weird because, I have a lot of friends that I know their spouses. And I actually have a couple that has come to me and has asked me to be the therapist. Well, not an official therapist, but basically a neutral person to hear them out and hear their stories. So I'm listening to both of them individually on phone calls and trying to see what they're living and trying to help them through it without having that title of a psychiatrist or psychologist. I think it just makes it more comfortable and they feel a little safer because it's a friend.
How does that affect you on a day-to-day basis? So, do you have a relationship currently? Are you married, that sort of thing? And what's the day-to-day like for you now you've gone through this journey?
So basically, after my separation, which was almost 2 years ago now, I met a woman and I completely fell in love. Unfortunately, it was the right person, wrong time kind of situation. She's got some work to do, and I think I've got some work to do on myself as well before we can be together, if ever we're going to be together. So I'm not married right now, and I won't say I'm single either, because my heart is basically emotionally married. That's the way I describe it. But it's definitely taken a turn because it's just made me realize all of my past relationships, why they didn't work. You meet a certain person, you work on yourself, and then all of a sudden you understand why all of your past relationships didn't work. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I realized in the past, I probably wasn't the best boyfriend. I probably wasn't the best spouse. I probably wasn't the best partner or the best friend in some cases. And after my last separation, I basically made a decision to stop that. And now today at 36 years old, I want to be the better version of myself, but also the best version of a partner and a best friend to my partner. And so it does change a lot of things because obviously it changes relationships with your friends and family. But in my current relationship, it kind of is a shocker, I would say, because most women aren't even as emotionally mature as I've become. So when they discover that a man is actually able to express himself so well, show vulnerability and focus on intimacy, it does scare some people away. I'm not gonna lie.
I can imagine that it would encourage the right people, though. Have you ever had a point when you've had some better connections with people because of this. Almost like, yes, it might be rubbing some people up the wrong way, but then the connections you do have are so much more, I guess, complex or genuine.
To be quite honest, it's actually worked the opposite way for me. I've met some people throughout this past year, women especially, that have talked to me and stuff, and I've discussed with them. And the moment I open up and talk about emotions, it actually scares them away because they're not used to that. And that's where it gets kind of sneaky because women today, that's what they want. But for some odd reason, the moment they have it, it scares them away because they're not used to it. And I've noticed that most women, they like to stay in this, specific comfort zone, right? They like to stay in what they're used to. And so the moment someone like myself comes along and is able to, target specific emotions, understand how they're feeling, discuss in a normal, mature way instead of screaming and threatening to leave, they don't understand it. And in most cases, most of them have been, this is too good to be true. I feel like this is going to blow up in my face later on, so I'm just going to step back. I don't like where this is going. So it's a weird place to be in, Michael. I'm not going to lie.
It's an interesting concept of preventing things, isn't it? Like if you think about if you predict that it could go badly in the future, you then get in protection mode and prevention mode because then why would you do it if it's not going to work out?
Exactly. Well, because I think people see that as a conflict because you've probably heard this before too. When it looks too good to be true, it's like it's almost a red flag, right? Like
Yeah.
everything is going well, like it's almost a red flag, like something's not right. And then you start looking for issues in the relationship because you're like, this is so weird. I'm not used to this. Why is everything so peaceful? Why is everything so mature? Why is everything so relaxed? A lot of women and men in today's relationships, unfortunately, they're in chaotic relationships and they get used to this chaos and it becomes their comfort zone. So the moment it's not chaotic, it's just a red flag. It's like this is not normal. Something's gonna happen. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point because it's almost like it's normal, isn't it? Like it's normal for them. So anything that's not that becomes almost like the red flag or the thing that's in the way. It becomes the obstacle because things are going to be better than they ever have, and that's what's scary.
Exactly. And I don't know if you've noticed, but like the past few months, I would say I'd say the past few months, there's a lot of new terms that have popped out that a lot of people are using now. Terms like narcissist, breadcrumbing, gaslighting, ghosting, slow fading, all that stuff. These are all terms that didn't exist before. But the reality is, all of these issues did exist before. It's just that there was no term for it. And now that there are terms for it, all of a sudden people are realizing these things, and that's what they're calling these different behaviors, And all of a sudden, why has ghosting become so popular is exactly because of that, is because people's relationships have been so chaotic in the past few years that the moment it gets normal or peaceful, they ghost, right? Which means that they basically just disappear. They don't have the emotional maturity to speak up and sit down and have serious discussions. Instead, they take the easy way out, which is to basically just disappear. If I don't confront you, I don't have to deal with it. And if I don't have to deal with it, that makes me feel more comfortable. So the easier way out is to ghost. And I'm really seeing that a lot these days.
I wonder what your thoughts are on this because it has happened a lot. You see it more online these days with TikTok doing its thing. And I wonder what your thoughts are on things like narcissist or gaslighting when it could just be a perception issue in that there's a lot of talk or living your best life and being the best version of yourself, and then you've got the whole self-care movement and things of that nature. It's almost forcing people to be a little bit more self-centered in that they're going after what they want, which they're entitled to do. That's perfectly okay. But then if someone that they spend their time with is also doing the same, for example, if you're both doing that, there could be some conflicts there, or there could be some elements of prioritizing that's not quite right. Is that the same as being narcissistic or gaslighting or any of these other terms that goes on? Or is it you're simply trying to put yourself first, but you're both doing that?
I love that idea. I love that question, and I think you're right on this because I think people confuse attachment styles in some cases with narcissism. And what I mean by that is if you are a person who has a more secure attachment, you've said it, you're thinking more of yourself. You're a very peaceful person. You just live your day by day. You don't worry about the past, you don't worry about the future. You just want things to be comfortable. You're not looking for trouble. And sometimes people will confuse that with narcissism because they say, well, he's just thinking about himself, or they're just thinking about, she's just thinking about herself. And so I think it has taken a turn. You have to really look up the definition of narcissism to understand it. But basically people have now started using it in the wrong way. People are using that term way too easily now instead of saying, and studying the attachment styles or the love languages to actually understand it. And that's work that I've put in quite a bit the past year. I didn't even know what my attachment style was. I didn't even know what my love languages was. And I've spent a lot of time determining what I stand by, who I am, and where I come from, and also studying other attachment styles to better understand them. But that has also helped me separate a secure attachment or avoidant or anxious from narcissism. And so you do have to put more time into that to understand it better. But I think you're right. People have completely mixed the two up now, especially nowadays.
I find it quite interesting though, because it also has this red line attached to it in that you can't really cross it. When someone says it, it's then like, well, if you question it, what does that then make you? So it causes you to question yourself more often than not. And it doesn't really solve the problem. The way that I think about it, and I wonder what your thoughts are as well, Patrick, is there's an element of all we're doing is this tit for tat kind of situation where someone may treat you badly, possibly, you then feel somewhat wanting to do it back to them or to somebody else, in that the whole negativity gets passed on, positivity can also get passed on, but there is this sense of somebody somewhere, in order for this pattern to stop, needs to have something done to them that they don't like and then not pass it on. Almost like, when you were a kid at school and you were playing like tag or catch and kiss or whatever the term is when you were kids, and someone always would try and tag the teacher and the game's over then because the teacher's not going to join in. That's the way that I picture it needing to be for things to actually get better. Someone somewhere has to not join in with this.
Right. And I think if you're in a relationship, it's funny you say that because if you're in a relationship, or not if you're in a relationship, but if you were to ask someone who was in a relationship, they'll probably say, oh, my ex had narcissistic traits. And then you would ask the other person, and they'd probably say the same thing, only because they didn't agree with each other. That's where the terms are mixed up a little, which I find quite funny.
How would we actually go about building genuine connections then? It seems like you've become quite the connoisseur in this area, Patrick. So I wonder what would be your go-to for building connections. So we could start offline if you wanted, and then transition into to online because you built quite the community for yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the online is much, much different. I think, let's say, in person, obviously, to be able to create these great connections, I think there's a lot of patience that has to be involved. It starts from that. And I think there has to be some sort of opening, at least the minimum of opening to understand the person, where the person comes from. A lot of the best relationships I've seen so far have also been the hardest relationships. They're relationships that are very difficult because you have to have those serious talks once in a while. You have to have these difficult conversations. And I think a lot of relationships today, a lot of people are looking for the other person to satisfy their needs or their happiness, when technically they should be working together. I did a post actually the other day that represented that. It's like every relationship, you have two people going into the relationship with their own baggage, right? And you have to be able to unpack that baggage together and then build a new suitcase for the best trip of your life, right? So I myself had to dig in very, very deep to find out what my trauma was for my anxious attachment style. I have an anxious attachment style, and I know why. I know where it comes from today, and I didn't know that 2 years ago. And I think that by knowing it and going into my next relationship, I'll be able to explain that to my partner so that whenever they do something that might trigger me, we can talk about it instead of saying, hey, you're doing narcissistic things. It's not about that. There's a way to communicate. There's a way to listen as well. A lot of people in today's age, they listen, but they don't hear you, which is a huge difference. And my next relationship really has to start from a best friend relationship. I think that if you're able to get along as best friends, you can have the best relationship out there. But to do so, you have to have intimacy. And to have intimacy, you need to be able to show yourself vulnerable. And so I think that if you cannot do that, unfortunately, you're always going to be on that quest to find that ideal relationship because basically you're looking for the other person to kind of fill in those voids when you have to do it yourself, if you know what I mean.
I do, yeah. I wonder what are your thoughts on the online space as well? It seems like it's an ever-changing environment.
Well, the online, I have to be honest, I kind of stay away from that for a simple reason that, it's like anything, right? And internet trolls, you've probably heard of internet trolls. It is always easier for people to be behind their screen or be behind their phone and say things. And the moment it comes to real life and you have to do it in person, all of a sudden they can't do it anymore because now it's right in their face. And so online, I think is completely different. I'm not saying it's not to do. It's not my thing. I don't do it. Obviously, if it would start online, I would do whatever it takes to bring it to offline as soon as possible. But it is much, much different because I think people behind their screens, they are not themselves. It's like going out for drinks, you know? When you start drinking, you become this different person. Being behind your screen, it's so much easier to say things than to actually show it in person. And I think that's why a lot of people get catfished. A lot of people they think they met the love of their life, but as soon as it comes to communicating in person, they just can't do it. But on the phone, it's so much easier because they have time to respond. Like right now, we're having this online discussion. It's back and forth. It's better than if we were to be texting, because if we were texting, I'm giving you all that time to think about the perfect answer, which is not being your true self. The discussion we're having right now, the answers are very quick, right? So these are the answers that we're giving, they're authentic. But if you were to give me the time to answer, I would always have the perfect answer. Therefore, I could easily make you fall in love because I'd always be able to tell you exactly what you want to hear.
Is that something that's becoming increasingly common now, where everyone is just being told what they want to hear the entire time? We could think about social media generally if you wanted, Patrick, but it just seems like that's the way everything's going.
I think so. And to take it to another level here, I think AI is starting to change things as well because there are a lot of people that have difficulty expressing themselves and they're literally taking it to Chat GPT. They're actually literally taking it to AI and asking AI to form sentences to answer their partners or their dating situations. So it's not even them talking anymore. Now it's AI, and AI is based, it doesn't have emotions, but it has enough technology and knowledge to be able to give the answer that somebody would like to hear.
That's a very good point. I would hate to be the kind of person that ended up falling for an AI that someone was using to answer my questions, or I don't know, jokes, flirtations, that sort of thing. Even business leaders as well, where you sort of think if they're using AI to form pretty much everything, whether it's their marketing, their copy, their pictures, in some cases, even video now, it's getting to a point where we're just simply not going to know what's real and what's not anymore. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what is real now?
Exactly. And so can you imagine, spending, I don't know, 6 months, a year online with someone, just, maybe long distance, you're discussing, and everything they say is always on the spot. They're telling you everything you want to hear. They're saying things that you've never heard before. And then whoops, you decide, to take it a step further. You meet in person, you start dating, and whoops, and when it's time to have a serious conversation, they freeze because they don't know how to communicate because they've been communicating through AI all this time. And so you've been led on. You've been led on by that, and you thought it was going to be a great relationship for in the end to be completely drastic change. And obviously that doesn't work. So it's very scary where things are going, I think. People today have a lot of difficulty communicating. And so when you give them tools like that, it does change the dating world quite a bit, if you ask me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Does it impact things like dating apps as well? Like I picture it, I kind of know the answers, yes, but what's it like to engage with people that are actively trying to search for their partners or their future life partners in some cases? It seems like if you're going in with this pre-idea that like, I want to go on this app to find love, to find a relationship, it's different to social media in some ways. Does that make it even harder to make these decisions?
I would say so. I mean, I'm not against dating apps. I myself have never been on them, but my best friend has met his wife and he has two kids with her on Tinder. My cousin, same thing. He's engaged and has three kids with his. And I wouldn't say Tinder doesn't work, but again, in today's world, people are using AI to build their Tinder profiles. For what they say on there. And then what becomes even more difficult, especially for women or for men, that is, as a man, when you're on a dating app, you have to understand and realize that you're competing against 15, 20, 30 people at the same time. You know what I mean? So you have to be the best one in there. So that's exactly what happens. I think people just start going all out to try to impress as much as they can so that they can pop out of the crowd. And then, whoops, once they get into the relationship, they've almost given everything they got to try to get them. So they have nothing left when it becomes serious.
When it comes to building all these, I guess, more authentic connections and relationships, and you mentioned communication and things of that nature as well. Did you take this into the business world as well when you started your companies and the time heals everything movement as well? How do you use these skills in your business?
Well, so what happened basically is when I launched Clicot, which is the watch brand, I couldn't really integrate that into that business because it's a one man show. I'm the sole owner, and I do everything is automized. Is that? I'm sorry, my excuse my French. In French, it's automatisé. Everything is basically automatic. Everything happens by itself. So I don't need employees or anything like that to do it. Everything's online, so it's very easy to manage. What happened afterwards is that I started getting questions from people asking me, what does Clicquot have to do with the advice that you're giving on TikTok? Because on TikTok, I never talk about my watch brand. It's very rare. And so people are like, what is the link here? I don't understand why you're doing this on TikTok and then you have a watch brand. And I said, that's a great question. And that's where the time fixes everything came from. So I had to find a way where I could connect my watch brand with what I was doing on TikTok. And so time fixes everything. Time comes from my watch brand. And then time fixes everything is for everybody that's going through a healing journey, that's working on themselves, that are going through a breakup, a situationship, they lost their job, whatever it is. And so time fixes everything. It's the movement that we started to help people in their healing journey and to make them understand that on a general basis, most of everything that we go through in life, time will fix it. It doesn't necessarily fix it, but it will make it better. How many things can you think of in the past that you thought you were going through the worst part of your life, right? You something happened to you and you said, this is the worst day of my life. How the hell am I going to get out of this? And look at you now. You don't even think about that moment anymore. Or when you think about it, you're like, huh, do you remember when I was like that back then? I cried so much, I did this and that, and look at me now. I'm so much better. That's what we mean by time fixes everything. And that's when it took off. People just started loving that they were going through stuff and they could be wearing a hoodie that says time fixes everything on it. And then if they'd see someone in the street wearing the same hoodie, they knew that they were going through the same thing. Right. So that's the community that we're building it through there. And so the vulnerability and information that I share on TikTok has now merged with my watch brand with the time fixes everything movement.
What would you put the success of that down to? If you could boil it down a little bit, how did it become so successful?
Well, I think again, like I said, the word that comes to mind is relatable. I think there's so many people out there. If you think of your friends or your family, everybody, and I mean everybody, is going through something. It could be their relationship, it could be their work, it could be their friendships, it could be their health, it could be financially. We're all going through something. And I feel that since COVID, nobody really talks about these things anymore. Everyone's kind of shut down, has become a little more independent. And unfortunately, they're going through war with themselves. because they're not getting it out. So it's just accumulating in their heads. And so the success I think would I would say comes from the fact that we have a community where if you come on to our lives on TikTok, every week, every night at 8 p.m. Eastern time, it is a community where you can feel safe, you can feel heard, you can come talk about anything and everything, and no one will judge you because we're all in the same boat. We're all rowing in the same direction. And I think that people have been able to relate to that and say, you know what? I don't feel good today. I'm going to connect on TikTok and I'm going to go chat with the community because everyone's, trying to get out of something. They're very positive, they're very welcoming, and that's where the success came from.
Do you find that that is still like that when it's at scale, like as things grow, when they grow, do you think that there will be new challenges in terms of maintaining the connection, or would you say that you had a plan for when things do take off again?
We definitely have a plan for that. I mean, it is taken off. It's only been 2 months that Time Fixes Everything has seen the light of day. But the speed that it's growing is pretty impressive. And we have what we call the TFE wall, which you might have heard. Basically, what that is we're building a wall of people that are wearing Time Fixes Everything hoodie, and we're making it virtual, and we also have a physical one. So I'm actually filling up my office with everybody's picture that is part of the community and part of, so they want to have a sense of belonging. And I think the more it grows, the more partners we'll have in this. So what I've seen happen so far is that in the beginning, it was just me, myself, and I kind of managing this stuff. And as time went by, we started seeing regular faces. And these regular faces now are coming into the lives and they're kind of managing the discussions as well. And we recognize the names. And I think that's what's happening is that there's certain names that we recognize. I would call them the OGs, I guess, of the movement. And so I'm getting a lot of help now with people, with the discussions to be able to answer all the questions and do all that stuff. But in reality, what we're looking to do is eventually have retreats where we'll be able to go on vacation somewhere. And if people want to join us and into these retreats, somewhere down south or in Europe, whatever, we haven't discussed the places yet, but people will be able to travel and come spend some time with the Time Fixes Everything community within each other. And so even might do some conferences. We're thinking of doing some meet and greets and some conferences. My goal, as I've said before, I would love to be able to fill up a stadium of people who would come see, me talk about whatever it is. We'll put up the subjects and stuff. So it does have the potential to get there. It's just a question of time. Again.
I'm sure it'll fix that as well, Patrick.
Yeah.
So let's help those that are wanting to be leaders or they want to be business owners. It seems like you've built your business around the community, around the concept of time. And I wonder, do you have any advice for people that want to build a community around their business and around their company? What advice would you have for those people?
I would tell them to stop hiding behind closed doors and come out. Show who the owner is. A lot of companies today, that's what happens. We don't even know who the owners of the companies are, right? Because they have so many people in position. If you look at the big companies, you look at Facebook, we all know who the owner of Facebook is. It's Mark Zuckerberg. We all know Elon Musk with Tesla. We all know Jeff Bezos from Amazon. We all know Richard Branson from Virgin. These are the people that are putting themselves out there. And I've learned as a business owner that if you're putting yourself out there and you're showing the true colors of yourself, people or customers will support your company and you won't even have to ask for it. They're going to want to support it because they like the person behind it. And that's what's changed for me. In the beginning, when I launched this, everything was behind closed doors. I didn't want anyone to know that I was the owner of the watch company. And then I quickly realized, and I could ask you the same question, Michael, how many watch brand owners do you know?
Me, one.
One. You see? So that becomes very unique in some way. And I think that's what people enjoy. And so if you have a business, that's definitely what I would say is stop hiding behind closed door. Show the people who you are, what your morals are, what your mission is, and the clients and customers will love it, and you will form a community just by being yourself.
Do you find that that is like a big sell? It's almost like the Harley Davidson of of brands and companies where you build a community that's so strong that you'll have loyal customers for as long as you're a company.
Well, see, the thing with that is, you just said it, Harley Davidson doesn't have to do any marketing because their customers do the marketing for them, right? Everyone knows Harley Davidson because they know someone who's either had one, knows someone who has one. It's word of mouth, right? And if they do marketing, believe me, it's very minimal. All right. Kind of like Rolex. Or I have an even better example. Let's talk about Rihanna. We all knew Rihanna when she started and she came out as a singer, but she didn't become a billionaire by singing. She became a billionaire by starting up I think it's her fragrance line or makeup. I always confuse the two, but she's got something in beauty products, and that's what made her a billionaire. And so people started buying the product because it was Rihanna. It doesn't mean that she has the best perfume in the world, but people love Rihanna, you know? So I think that's where people kind of drop the ball on things. They think that maybe if they stay silent and they put the right people in place, the community will form. But the reality is that you can do it yourself and the community will do the marketing for you, and that's it.
Yeah, it sounds almost like you build the community around the person or the product or something, where yours seems a little bit, I don't know, like it started off around the watches and then it became around yourself. Am I right in saying that, or would I be wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And that's why today the sales have quadrupled just because now I'm out there and before I wasn't. So the community that we've built, now I have customers that they're only buying watches. And I've had people they told me straight up, Patrick, your watches are great, but I'm really buying it because you've helped me so much get through some difficult times. And I want to support you because I want you to continue doing what you're doing. And that's very authentic. That's very honest. And I think that's where my success kind of switched because my watch brand is only 3 years old. It's not very old. I'm not Rolex, but I feel that my customers feel much more loyal to this brand than any other watch brand because they don't have that connection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's a very good point, actually, because if you think of some of the problems that companies would go through, it's usually down to how many customers they have or clients or sales, because then they've then got the budget to do whatever else that they wanted to do. Usually they just simply run out of money and they can't really keep doing things anymore. It seems like such a simple problem, like it's dead easy to explain, but it's so hard in terms of solving it. How did you solve it?
Well, I think that's it. I think, if I were to make a mistake tomorrow, and I'll give you an example. We just launched 11 new watches on Monday. Okay. And let's just say, I'll give you an example. Let's just say it would have been a major flop. The website wouldn't have worked. The prices would have been wrong. Anything can go wrong when you're doing a watch launch. All right. And what I want to say with this is, let's say I would have dropped the ball on this launch. People enjoy and love me so much that they would have been very forgiving. Whereas if I wasn't there showing my human side and my mission, people probably would have been extremely mad about the flop and they would have taken it to the internet to basically scrap the name and give bad Google reviews. But my customers, for me, the fact that they love the person so much, they would never do that. Even if I was to drop the ball, they would say, "Oh my God, poor Patrick, it didn't go as planned. It's okay." That's how it would go down. So it doesn't require me to fix things because the community is there for me as I'm there for them.
That's such a good point. You can just imagine it, can't you? Where website crashes because of the traffic or anything like that, and you sort of think, oh, if it was a brand like, I don't know, Rolex, or because it's one of the only watch brands I know, Patrick, apart from your own,
Yeah.
and it just seems like I would be a little bit more frustrated and a little bit less likely to actually follow through and buy one than if I knew the owner on a more personal level. I'd feel like, oh, well, he's human as well. He's the person doing it all. He's human as well. People make mistakes, that sort of thing. So I do think that my own self-talk would change if things got personal.
You got it. Exactly. And that's the advantage. So when you have customers that believe in you more than they believe in your company or the product, you're safe. I mean, it can only go up from there.
So how would you encourage people to encourage others to believe in them, as a bit of a weird way of putting it? Well, let's say you want to encourage this belief, encourage this personal connection, this belief in your mission, or whatever it happens to be, whatever people want other people to put their faith in. How would you encourage that? It sounds like such a difficult thing to do, possibly even something that you can't necessarily engineer.
Right. Well, first things first, I think when you're in business, the biggest issue, not the biggest issue, but I think most entrepreneurs, they always show the good sides, right? They always show when things are going great. They never really post when it's going bad. And there's always that iceberg image it makes me think of that. You have that iceberg, where it's one size out of the water, but inside the water, it's like 10 times bigger. Um, that's all the stuff that people don't see. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes is entrepreneurs should be allowed to be able to show the bad days, to be able to show when things aren't going great. And I think if they did that, you said it before, you said showing the human part of people, that changes everything because that's when you realize, okay, you know what? Hold on a second. I could be mad at this, but the person tried really hard to make it happen. So I didn't know this kind of stuff could happen. I didn't realize that technology could flop. And it just makes you realize that sometimes we jump too quickly to conclusions and we take it to the internet too fast to talk trash about someone or a company. And we don't think about the efforts and time that was put in behind it. So I would say to those people to do exactly that. If you want to take it to that next level, don't be shy. And again, it comes back to our discussion from the beginning of showing and being vulnerable. If you're showing vulnerability through your relationships, but you're doing it through your business as well, people will see you completely different. And I think that's what they tend to kind of stay silent because they don't want people to know that they have their bad days. They don't want people to know that they have debt. They don't want people to know that their supplier didn't, send the order on time, whatever the case might be. But if they were to speak about it, people would be so much more understanding.
How do you suppose you strike that balance? Because I wonder if there's a risk there for some, possibly not yourself, Patrick, but the risk then becomes if things become too personal, it's a different relationship than a company. I'm trying to think of the right words. I think I'm getting it wrong. It's almost like if you become too friendly, you become friends, and then it becomes like, well, do friends buy from friends or do friends buy from other people? It's almost the same analogy of like if you want to help your child get better at sport, they're not really going to necessarily listen to their parents, but they might listen to a coach because it's a bit more of a professional relationship. So how do you maintain the professional side of things as well, like personal and professional?
Well, there is definitely a line that you cannot cross. You cannot get too personal either. Most of the time, people don't know exactly what I'm doing, where I'm going out to eat. There's certain things I do not share because obviously I want to keep a private life, and that's for sure. So I wouldn't encourage to share everything, but anything that has to do with your company, good or bad, would definitely help. But yeah, I mean, I do keep it, like you said, on a fine line to the maintaining a lifestyle and keeping things private. Because you're right, you can't. It gets to the point where if you're too close to the person, it can be confusing. And the thing with that is, especially if you're a person like myself, if you get too friendly, especially with women, in my case, it can lead, some people on. And I've had quite a bit of people that have reached out to me and they say, look, I can't follow you anymore because I'm starting to get feelings. And they've backed off, because they were starting to catch feelings because my presence online is I'm there every single day, right? So I've learned that people can fall in love through connections online, which becomes that dangerous part of it. But I think that's where, as an entrepreneur and a person, you have to be able to differentiate both aspects of this, the personal and business, and keep a strict line in between. And if people get out of hand, don't be scared to put them back in their place and say, hey, listen, I appreciate the love and support, but please remember that this is, business. It's not to build relationships or anything like that. And just maintain that.
Do you have any advice for businesses in terms of where the line might want to be? You mentioned if it's to do with the business, then share it. But what if they're trying to build the community around themselves, a bit like you mentioned Rihanna before? How would you make these decisions or these choices or lines in the sand of how to do it? And the ways that you could adjust maybe if things don't go to plan.
Well, I think there's different levels. Like if we talk about Rihanna, obviously Rihanna can't do what I do. She's not going to sign on to TikTok and do TikTok lives and chat with her community. We're definitely not at the same level. When you get to a level like hers, obviously you've got a team in place, and instead what you do is meet and greets. Where you have when you launch a product, you go to a certain store and you meet your clients, you meet your supporters, and you do autographs and things like that. That's where it becomes a little different. But for someone like me who's got a little bit more time and is not a Hollywood superstar, I'm able to have a better relationship. Will that change later on, depending on where this goes? Probably. I might not be going TikTok lives at night, but maybe I'll be doing these meet and greets to keep that connection somehow. So I think things do change. They can't remain the same, but you do have to adapt depending on the popularity and success of your business.
That's a good point, actually. I mean, can you imagine Rihanna doing lives every night? I don't suppose she has the time. But I wonder if there are other things that I guess some businesses and some companies can do. Like you mentioned, autographs and meet and greets and things of that nature. How would yours look? So yours is so built around the community and the depth of the connection to an extent. How would you maintain the connection when things get to that point where it just becomes unscalable?
So what's been great about that is that the community, yes, started from an idea, but the community is actually building itself within itself. And what I mean by that is, yes, I'm kind of like the person speaking about all this, but the people that are involved have actually become friends. And they're talking even offline. Some people we've created friendships, we've created relationships, we've brought people back together, and that's happening within the community because everybody's talking to each other, even when I'm not online. So, seeing that when we sign in and seeing everybody that recognizing themselves, and you see it in the chat, everybody talks together. And sometimes I'll see a message, hey, this person, contact me when we sign off. I love your attitude. I'd love to chat with you. And this community is talking to each other as well. It's not just about me. It's not just about time fixes everything. It's about the people that are inside of it as well. So even if I'm not there tomorrow, and this is going to continue because the people are loving everything around it. It's not just Patrick. I don't know if that answers the question.
It's almost like the customers, the community, the movement that you have, it's almost like it's becoming its own thing where they manage themselves a little bit or they organize their own events, maybe. It seems very customer and community driven, like it's not just you anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like I had someone this week tell me, "Hey, can you send me this person's information? I want to get together." They're in Florida, both of them, and they're like, "I love her attitude. I would love to send her a little DM to invite her for a coffee." And I'm like, "Wow, that's amazing." You know what I mean? And this happens on a regular basis, so it's growing almost by itself. Again, like I said, everything is about word of mouth, right? And I've had people that they've been out and about with the Time Fixes Everything sweater, and people have come up to them and said, "I like your sweater. Where is that from?" And then it just sparks conversations. And then they realize that they're going through something too. So they ask for the link, and then they go out and they buy themselves a sweater as well. So it's almost like a virus. I want to say it like that, but it's like a virus of positivity. It's weird.
Is there anything that you could speak to in terms of why you think that is and how could somebody else replicate it? Have you thought about that?
I definitely have. Yeah. I mean, it definitely can be replicated 100%, by who I don't know. But the thing is, it's always the person who starts it who gets the most attraction. You don't want to be a copy of somebody else, right? So I think that somebody would have to start something like that, would have to be very different than what I do, because or else they're going to be like, "Oh, well, you're just copying Patrick." So I think if you want to get into that stuff, you can do it, but you got to think of your own creative and unique way to go about it.
I reckon that that's something that is probably more important than some of the other things that we've said. You need to find a way of making yourself unique, haven't you? If everyone just copies you, then they might not have the same success because you came first and you built it this way. And plus, the whole word of mouth thing, it's positivity spreads and so does negativity. You don't want thousands, tens of thousands of people coming to the realization that they've just copied you.
Exactly. You don't want to be a copycat.
So, in the spirit of leaving no stone unturned, Patrick, do you have any last bits of wisdom for us?
Not at all, Michael. What I'd leave you with is really this. Like, I understand everybody right now is going through some stuff. Some are much worse than others. And I would just love for people to understand that it's okay to talk about things. It's okay to open up about things. It's okay to show yourself vulnerable and to really understand. And I know that this might sound corny, but time actually does fixes everything. I want you to realize that whatever you're going through right now, you will look back at this day in 2 or 3 or 5 years from now, and you're going to understand why it had to happen this way. You're going to understand why you had to go through all that trouble is to be where you're going to be in those next few years. And just to remember that there is people out there who are willing to listen, and you just have to ask. You just have to ask. Don't be the one to say, "Well, I'm not going to talk to anybody about it because I don't want anyone to listen to my problems." When there's someone out there that all they want to do is hear about your problems and be there for you. You cannot take that privilege away from them. And I would leave you on that.
Fantastic, Patrick. Those that are listening, if they want to learn more about you, enter your world a little bit, Patrick, how can they do that?
They can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. I also have a link tree on my bios where all of my official links are there because it's, very important. There are many, many fake accounts out there pretending to be me. So please be careful on who you follow. You want to make sure that you're following my accounts. All of my links are in my bio. And obviously, if you're looking to get more information on Time Fixes Everything and what we're about, what our mission is, what we're trying to accomplish, you can go to timefixeseverything.com and all of the information is there. You can even see the wall that we talked about in this interview. So don't be shy. Go check it out, and hopefully you will be a part of the community as well.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Patrick, thanks so much. I have enjoyed it, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.